Wow, that was great. Yeah.
We have to redo the beginning. Introducing the show, okay?
Oh, thanks.
How many
minutes?
It's only about 3 minutes, so let's
Okay,
do
tell me.
silence.
Okay. Hi, this is Paula Gloria, and this show is called Farther Down the Rabbit Hole because we like to go into topics more deeply. Today we're going to be getting a call in from Angela Stark, and she's got that really wonderful website, myprivateaudio.com. And Joe Barton and I have learned so much from the speakers that she's had on that show. And Frank Craven is joining me on set, so thank you, Frank.
Hello, Paula. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a show Friday nights at 9:30, Channel 34, What's Ailing Healing America? A question we have a right and duty to ask and answer, because in all of nature there's the poisonous plant and there's the antidote. It's about balancing and finding the balance. So we all have the solutions to every problem, right? Or God has the solution. So in reality, there is no problem. There's only a solution.
Tell me about What's Ailing Healing America.
Well, my cousin got busted, unfortunately, and he told me that Nassau County gets $350 from Albany for every prison. So if your insurance lapse, even if you yell at your wife, not hit her, you just yell, you can be taken in. We've got a prison code, we got a prisoner system that's really ridiculous. They make quotas and they make money out of every prisoner, and it's become a privatized industry.
Let me give you a dilemma that I went through the other day. Joe and Jay have a neighbor, a couple, and they had a new baby, and they're fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And they're fighting so much that the young wife called up the police.
Right.
And Joe and Jay came outside because they didn't want the police coming in again without a warrant to their place because they smell marijuana, because that's what Joe and Jay do, you know?
Yeah.
So they were outside watching. I was down handling stuff here with the Gramercy Park thing, the right to travel freely, editing that and getting it up. And Joe said that the police came, they took the guy in handcuffs, put him in the police car for about an hour and went upstairs and worked with her. And then eventually came down and released him, and then he went his merry way. That's actually false arrest. So
Right.
Joe felt, though, to get involved with that, he wanted the lady to be safe. And the tendency is, I mean, Angela later on is going to be talking about what she went through with an abusive relationship. When I went through that type of abuse, I got kicked by my husband when I was 19. I just left the relationship. I really loved this man. I was celibate for 10 years afterwards because I knew what true love was. But I didn't want to be abused or kicked.
Right.
But I could understand why women would stay in those relationships.
No.
Now,
Hit me once, shame on you. Hit me twice, shame on me.
Well, but love is love. You know, I just think I had a love for another calling eventually, and then eventually I found Joe, who I loved so much, so that was all okay. But what would you do? Would you tell the guy that he was arrested falsely? Joe eventually told the wife, but he didn't think. She said, "I'll never let him back again," but then he's back again. What would you do? Would you tell him that the police arrested you incorrectly? Because it's empowering when you know your rights.
In today's New World Order, there is no right or wrong, and the police are doing what they want. We live in a disguised dictatorship, and it's not like fascist controls. Our Bill of Rights have been shredded by the Patriot Act, so I'm not really up to speed about what's right or wrong, what's legal or not legal. To me, it's totally ludicrous what's going on. I want our country back, and I would hope that we would have police that would respect us with courtesy and be our servant,
but
they're like our masters now.
I'm trying to make it personal, because in this case, the lady felt fearful. Joe said he could see real fear in her eyes.
Right. Well,
and the idea of the police is to protect you. So if you're going to jump on them...
But a man who beats a woman needs to be arrested. How dare a man strike a female? And these macho men think they have a right to do that?
Yeah, but just a
it.
second. Due process to stop somebody, to arrest a free person, is a really big deal. You should to do it properly. Of course, they're disturbing the peace or hitting whatever. And the officer is supposed to witness that. If everything's under control, you're not supposed to be able to do it without a warrant. Now, maybe you could get a judge to look at...
As I said, my cousin got arrested just for yelling at his wife. He didn't beat her. He didn't hit her.
Well,
they strike her or threaten to strike her, but they were yelling. And it was like disturbing the peace.
But
and the cops came, and he was taken away in handcuffs.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say here is the correct procedure, if you put handcuffs on someone, is to immediately take them before a magistrate or a judge and to start the process. It's not a call of the police unless there's something really threatening right then and there. You're not supposed to just tie somebody up for a while you talk to the wife. They should have taken him immediately down and gone through that process. Even fingerprinting is interrupting due process, because what they can do is they can fabricate a story. In Joe and Jay's cases, in both cases, they had after entry warrants, which means you don't even need a warrant anymore. That means the police are making the call. And we're going to be hearing from Angela Stark, and she is the fabulous internet radio host of TalkShoe, and she posts on www.myprivateaudio.com. So let's enjoy Angela. Hi, Angela. What do you think about that, Angela, what Frank just said?
Well, I agree. I think we're all sort of coming to terms with what's so blatantly in the media today, what we are seeing coming out of what's supposed to be our leadership. And I think we need to look to ourselves. We need to look inside and find peace within in order to overcome what's going on. And we can't just, drown everything out with TV and
mainstream TV is a mind controller that cheerleads war, and it's ridiculous. Right. And America has a collective broken heart. How can we live with perpetual war? It was terrible during the Vietnam era. Now with Afghanistan and Iraq, we pray for our brothers on that side of the world. We don't want to live with constant bombing, and this war on terrorism is a perpetual, ongoing thing that, obviously, in the Vietnam area, you invested in Sikorsky helicopters, and nowadays you invest in Halliburton or Martin Marietta, and these people you make off like bandits, like vultures, and it's ridiculous.
So, Angela, I sense you're a spiritual person. Is that true?
I think so. I would like to think so. I try to spread love, and I try to speak nice things and not so much bad things to my audiences, and I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how touched I am about your show, because the one I particularly liked is, let me pause and, well, how would you describe your website? I shouldn't describe your website. You describe your work, and then I'll tell you how it's affected me.
Gee, I just don't know. It's just a lot of information, stuff that I have compiled over the years since I've been, let me say, first of all, I got started with my awakening with Irwin Schiff. That was back in 1999. He asked me to look everything up and not to take his word for it when he told me that the income tax was voluntary. And that was pretty much it for me. It's been an educational experience.
Wait a second. I volunteered not to pay my taxes and give the government a break, and then they cranked on me, and I really had to go through a lot of changes until I made good. These people, it sounds like it's a good idea that's volunteer, but in reality, the man is the man, and IRS will crank on you.
Okay, Angela, here's a good example. Frank is not familiar with your website, and you've had so many experts talking about that. Can you explain to Frank what he did wrong?
Well, he didn't do anything wrong. We've all been subjected to the public school systems and television programming, and it all has to do with, keeping us stupid and dumbed down. And, you've heard all this before. It's not anything new. And I built the website to bring more information to people so that it would make it a little easier for them to discover what's really true and what's going on.
Well, I got news for you. I'm the poverty line, but I'm a rich person because I'm in freedom. But I usually get the money back that I make every year. So I decided to give Uncle Sam a break and say, forget it, because I'm not even going to file. And then they sued me, and they were going to garnish my wages. Fortunately, I found a nice guy, Michael Steinman, at H&R Block that sorted it all out patiently, and I'm back on track. But I try to ignore the government, even though I'm sort of below the radar. And they don't ignore you, even if you're a small guy. They inspect you, and then they garnish your wages unless you pay your taxes.
So,
right, it's not like they need the money. It's all about control. That's
right.
What it is.
But Angela, from listening to your website and the guests on your site, there really is a way, once you understand your constitutional rights. Can you sort of explain how that process has affected you, and I'll say what I've seen with Joe Barton and his son Jay Deberman.
Well, I think from what I've learned, we're all employees of the government. As soon as you take a Social Security number and they start withholding from you, you are put in a classification of an employee. And an employee of the United States government, which is really only that 10-mile square area, in the Northeast. But it's very complex. I can't really explain it.
I understand.
We should put a wall around Washington, D.C. and keep all the criminals in one spot.
I'm going to try to go deeper with you, because I know you also are a wealth of knowledge because of how you handle your guests, because it seems as though on one hand you've got people whose knowledge is so deep, it seems esoteric and beyond the reach of the average person. For example, Frank said you can't just go and say, I'm not going to file because it's voluntary. There's a legal way to go about it. And my understanding is you have to really be grounded in the feeling that you are part of we the people, and that we're a sovereign people, and that if some corporation got a franchise from we the people under the Constitution, they got this franchise with the understanding that they would protect the rights of the people. But unless people stand up as the belligerent claimant to say, my rights have been violated, the courts don't call a fraud until you've called it to their attention. That's how your website and your guests have affected me.
Well, wait till you see or hear our gentleman guest next Thursday. He'll straighten it all out for you.
Okay, so there was one person, I think it was Kurt Kallenbach, that was explaining how since the Civil War, when they threw out the Constitution and Abraham Lincoln became the first president of a corporation, and from that point on, Congress really had no power. And I think he was the one that said, because we are, I guess you say employees, but we certainly are citizens of the District of Columbia, which is a tiny physical area that only commands 3 electoral votes, you can see how voting is a rather useless process if you go through this sort of charade or this dog and pony show of an election. But in truth, it's only commanding 3 electoral votes. How many voters are there? 170 million, 170,000?
We're about 350 million population
people, but how many?
in America.
Angela, how many voters are there, or do you even care about?
I really don't know. I don't participate in that charade anymore.
I know.
It's so fake. I mean, you really don't have. It's all for show. It's all part of the programming. They lead us to believe with all this distraction that we have some kind of an effect on who they put in office, but we really don't.
I campaigned for Cynthia McKinney and 9/11 Truth.
And then they tell us it doesn't matter, go ahead, pick one because they're both in our pockets anyway. And they lead the people down some rosy path, which is all lies. It's all lies.
But Angela, I remember in college I voted. I went into one of those booths, and this was for about 4 or 5 weeks. I was smoking marijuana before I started transcendental meditation. Then they said no marijuana, and I never did it for decades. But when I was in the booth, I kind of had this feeling I was being ripped off. It was just this feeling that this is a useless process. And I thought that was because I was high on marijuana. But years and years went by, and I was working with Webster Tarpley, and he was getting me all worked up about voting again. And I thought, well, I've got a public access show on community affairs. I really ought to vote. So I did the same thing. I went into the voting booth somewhere near Gramercy Park, and I wasn't high on marijuana, and I had that same feeling that something is just not right here, that the effort that I'm putting into this is not going to make any difference. So I'm wondering from you, were you always kind of hip to voting being useless?
No. I went along like everyone else and thought I was doing my, civic duty and being a good, citizen and so forth. But like I said, back in 1999 when I met up with Irwin Schiff and he started opening my eyes by making me ask questions and not to just take anyone's word for anything and to look things up for myself. When someone tells you the income tax is voluntary after you've been paying for, 30 years, and have a CPA, and then you call up the IRS and you try to get them to tell you exactly what law makes you liable to pay, and they hang up on you 3 times, and you think, well, you're just getting disconnected, and you call back again, and they tell you to stop. Then they tell you to stop calling. That's a tip-off right there, right? And it's like,
Right.
how stupid have I been all this time? I've been paying taxes like a good little slave. I think they don't teach it in school. It's something we're brought up watching our families do every year, and it's all brainwashing. It's part of the programming.
But you really have to understand the process, and it's a tip-off, yes, when you call up, but then you have to get your affairs all in order, because the other night when it was Jon Stewart on, I for the first time heard that there was somebody named Tim something or other that apparently had been misleading people and getting people into a lot of trouble, where they not only would lose their houses, which it seems like they were on the track to lose anyway, but they might go to prison. And so Jon Stewart was saying, cut your losses at this because you didn't go about it properly. Can you talk about how that affected you, and I'll tell you how it affected me?
Well, I've heard it for a while now. It's not something new. You have to be careful, just like there are snake oil salesmen, there are Dick Cheneys and type people like that all over the place that'll sell you a bill of goods. So just like there are, in commerce anywhere in the world, there's also in this movement, the truth movement, I call it the truth movement, there will be charlatans trying to sell you a bill of goods. So one has to be careful and not just take everything they say to heart. You have to do some research and check it out for yourself. Don't just fall into that,
right.
slave bag, and
I'd like
regardless of who's
interject
steering you.
something. Apropos of what we were talking about before, that working with the Green Party, all the emails got blocked, and there was like internet censorship with Cynthia McKinney's speeches and press releases. I was trying to forward, and we were trying to get petitions and get her on the ballot as an alternative. And if you're in the Socialist Party, the Green Party, or any alternative besides the rinky-dink Republican Democrat, you're going to find yourself blowing smoke. Even Ross Perot was a multi-billionaire who was a big patriot. He couldn't get over. Jack Anderson. Any of the third-party candidates really can never get over.
Frank, I don't think you get what she said. She said it doesn't make any difference. If all of the voters is that correct, how you understand it, Angela?
Well, yeah, because your vote doesn't get counted. It's who said it? Those who vote decide nothing. Those who count the votes decide everything. So as long as we don't have, I built a site for Edward G. Griffin. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He wrote a book called The Creature from Jekyll Island. He's been around for a long time.
Excuse me, Angela, he pretty much plagiarized that from Eustace Mullins. The really definitive work was Eustace Mullins, and Eustace Mullins lived in the Library of Congress for 2 years, and he was a poor, struggling student who was visiting Ezra Pound while he was a political prisoner at St. Elizabeth's Hospital. And Ezra Pound had said, I'll give you $5 a week, because Ezra Pound couldn't leave, he couldn't leave the mental hospital. That was a way the court got jurisdiction over him and made him a ward of the court. And so he said he got maybe $10 from him, and then Ezra Pound ran out of money. So Eustace Mullins lived in the Library of Congress. He would, when the doors would close, he would sort of sneak into the stacks, and I guess he would, bathe in the bathrooms. And so he went through so much research, and then he wrote The Secrets of the Federal Reserve, and then he had to struggle to find a publisher, which I don't think he really ever did. He was self-published, and he said he couldn't understand why publishers didn't want to buy books that people clearly wanted to read. But I just wanted to interject that. Did you know that about Eustace Mullins' book?
Yes, I did. I read about Eustace Mullins and Ezra Pound, and I don't know, you're talking to me?
Yeah.
Yeah, but what I was going to say is I built a website called the Coalition for Visible Ballots. This was back in 2004. And so I followed Bev Harris around on the internet and other people that were involved in that whole following the votes, you know.
Oh, yeah, the fiasco with the computers, jerry rigging the elections. And of course, the vote was stolen in 2000. Gore clearly won. And so what? And then in 2004, Bush stole it again with the computers.
But then, you know, Gore was so pro on the global warming, which isn't a good sign.
It doesn't matter. Gore, Bush, they're all in the same group.
Yeah.
So they didn't really, those that control things, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, or the banking cartel families, they're the ones that put in the candidates.
Well,
Right.
Jimmy
Where
Carter
did Clinton
fooled them.
come
He
from?
didn't
Where
have
did
any...
Obama come from? I mean, these people come from out of nowhere. All of a sudden, they're the top dog. They're the candidate. How does that happen?
Right.
Okay.
Not by our doing, that's for damn sure.
Yeah, this
Okay.
Michelle Bachmann called for the death of Julian Assange. How a lunatic is that? Our great hero of WikiLeaks.
Let me tell you, if they get the stage, if they get the media attention, then they're probably on the take.
Of course, transparent. I transfer to transparency. That's our key for political awareness. And the whole movement in Spain, the Dignados, just transparency and web streaming in the boardrooms, and we'll have a better government, a vox populi, a consensus of the majority. It's very simple.
No, we don't believe in democracy, do we, Angela?
I don't think so. Demonocracy doesn't sound right.
Demonocracy.
To me.
It's called mob
rule.
rule. Angela, what I was really touched on your on your show once was there was an older lady, and you could see she clearly didn't have the ability to learn all the law and know how to stand up in a timely way, because even Constitution Man says it takes a certain amount of intestinal fortitude to do it. And there was another one of your guests, or your callers or listeners, sounds like a faithful listener, I believe his name was David, and he said that he would do this, in other words, the expert, it wasn't Constitution Man himself, but there was somebody else, sounded like a black voice, very competent, I think he was from Ohio, and he was just too swamped to take on her foreclosure case.
No, it's Harold. He's in New York.
Harold. Oh, okay, Harold was the expert, but I think it was David that said he would try to give this older lady a hand, and he said because he wanted to practice himself, and so he figured, well, she was giving up anyway, so even though he was not an expert, other than listening to your site, which I think does develop expertise, he took on her case, tried to help her, and went into court and found that everybody was cooperative. The judge didn't want to throw this old lady out of her home, and by setting up the argument legally, it gave the judge the opportunity to do the right thing. Now, didn't that make you feel great, Angela?
Sure. I feel there's a lot of those kind of moments, when people call in with good news, and it's very heartwarming. It gives me hope for the future.
And you talk about how you got involved with Constitution Man?
Well, I don't know. I think I've probably met almost all of my guests through the internet.
Right.
Except for Erwin Schiff and some others. But mainly somebody will send me an email, tell me to watch this video or that, or listen to this call or that one, and then the next thing you know, that's how I met you. First I saw you on the internet.
Right.
And then I don't know, I think God leads these people to me, because somebody sent me a link to Dean Clifford's video. It was Robert Fox actually sent me the link, and I watched it, and I watched all of them. There's like 5 hours or so of video, and it was, after all this time of doing it, my mouth still drops to the floor in awe of some of these people. This guy's brilliant. I mean,
Really?
Oh gosh.
Well, yeah.
I was just going to say, I don't actually meet them face to face. I'm just directed. Like, I feel like I'm directed by a higher power, and so I go with it.
I know. Let me outline how I came to you. It seems as though my husband, Joe Barton, has been pursuing the religious use of marijuana in the courts ever since he was 25 years old. When he first started doing this, his wife was breastfeeding one of their children, and it looked like 2 juries were going to vote with them because the prosecutor just looked like a lunatic, compared to these 2 nice people who really believed they were going to be helping the world. So the judge threw out the second jury because it looks like the prosecutor was losing the second jury, and they brought on a jury of 65-year-olds. This was the new hip scene coming on. He had just come back from Vietnam. He was involved with a commune. It was just wonderful things were happening. There was even one judge that came there, took some LSD because he wanted to see what it was like, and he said, after I've seen this experience, my feeling about you guys has completely changed. But unfortunately, the science didn't stay up with it. It's now relegated to, some demonic corner of our experience. They're rewriting history. If you go up to the Woodstock Museum, they want to pretend that drugs were never part of it. I as this avid meditator, felt that I think at the beginning, when you're first learning to use mantras and you're a little bit of a novice, it's a good thing to know what your sovereignty is like. You can be influenced by anything you eat. I'm very influenced by peppermint tea. It gives me a terrible stomach ache. So one man's meat is going to be another man's poison. But in any case, the third jury that came along, it was getting so intense, and Joe's wife stood up and she said, "You have a law book here and you have a law book here and no common sense in between." And Joe knew that she was going to be contempt of court, and she was nursing a baby and had another child, and he didn't know what to do with the kids if she was put in jail for 15 days, which is typically what happens when there's a contempt of court. So Joe bounces up and he says, "Your Honor, we don't need the jury, we don't need the prosecutor, why don't you just take us out right now and crucify us?" And the judge got up and he goes, "Contempt of court," like that, and he goes, "Oh," and he has a heart attack and he falls down. and so everybody's looking at the judge and they realize there's Joe, because they have to put chains on him and all that, and because he's just standing there. And they eventually put chains on Joe and they took him off, and he said from his cell window he could watch the ambulance coming and taking the judge away. Then the judge, so they had to postpone the trial for 3 months, and then the judge came back, and the first time he was in court, had he been looking at your website, he would have been hip to what was going to happen next, because he says, when you get a bad punch, you learn how to block it the next time. But every time you're punched in court and you have to go to jail for a long time, it takes a while to build this up. So what happened was they said, "We want to talk to you in the back room." The judge said, "He's going to be your attorney." Joe was fully intending to fire him. He knew he wouldn't get anything from the public defender that would do anything good for him. He gets in the back room. Had he been in court, this couldn't have happened. Had he been on the record, this couldn't have happened. What happened was, "Listen, you little shit, this is how it's going to be. You're going to get 5 years, your wife's going to get 5 years. Your kids are all going to be put up for adoption. And, they'll go into, protective services, and then after a year and a half, they'll be put up for adoption." Well, there was no way he wanted to lose his children, nor did his wife. So they became fugitives for 18 years. And
that's what they do. They beat you down, and it's all about controlling the masses. They don't want anyone, like George Carlin said, they don't want critical thinkers.
Right. And they also institutionalize the kids. They foster care. They'll take up a family and break up the siblings so that the kids will embrace the military or the pseudo cops and robbers games. The kids become institutionalized.
What did you say?
They do that for the money. They get they get revenues. They generate revenues every time they take a child.
Yeah.
There's contracts, just like when they take a prisoner. It's another head of cattle to put in the warehouse, and then they collateralize you, and Merrill Lynch is in charge of all those corporate.
Now you know who was a real eye-opener for me on that, and again it came from your talk show, is Gene
Keating.
Gene Keating. he really explained, when I heard that they use a QSIP number on the back of every indicted person and then take that and trade it on a securities market, speculating on the length of the sentence, I was horrified.
Yeah, well, it's like everybody's foreclosures. All these folks that are in foreclosures, they're doing the same thing. They monetize the note. Listen, the rabbit hole is so deep. Your email name is a good name because it's true. The further you dig, the worse it gets.
Thing about people with foreclosure notices, though, they should demand that the banks present the deed, because that can't really be kicked out of their house unless who properly owns that property. They claim it, but in reality, can they present the deed? And if they can't, then they can't really foreclose and kick you out.
Well, they actually, you should listen to John Stewart's calls for that. I mean, he's got it down. You know, the notary complaint and the trust. Now we've got the trustee complaint, because when you do the research, there is no trustee. Or they are, but they're fake.
Can you?
It's unbelievable.
Can you,
So
Angela?
hilarious.
Angela, here's how I understand the process, and I one of your callers or guests or listeners was saying, I know enough just to be dangerous, right? So we want to not be dangerous. We really want to have all our I's dotted properly and our T's crossed. But the way
No one should jump out and do anything without knowing what they're doing, because it's stupid to do that. Don't do that.
And I like the way Gene Keatings teaches, because he gets you to do your own research, because I'm reading that probate book that he suggested, written in 1880, and it's an eye-opener. Have you read that book?
No, I haven't. I wish I had the time to read everything I've been suggested to read.
I know. I know that must be really
One
tough.
thing I learned from you last week at that meeting you held in the village was that if you're busted for pot or something, you immediately say, do you understand the charges? No, I do not understand the charges. You don't plead guilty or not guilty. You hold harmless yourself or anybody for ingesting THC, tetrahydrocannabinoids, which are a proven healing ingredient of a God-given plant. This is good for you, and you take it, you consume it. Excuse me, I'm not doing harm to myself or to anyone. I don't understand these charges.
What do you
How
think?
about this one? How about saying, can I be bound to contract without full disclosure? And just leave it at that. That's from Dean Clifford. That's one
I
of his
see.
lines that I wrote down.
Now
Really good. It's
now-
all about contract, offer and acceptance.
Right, so like a contract would mean, like, if you're charged for something, it means that you bought something. Usually if somebody charges you for something, you bought something. Is that what you mean by a contract?
No, but you're charged with something, a crime, you're usually charged. They use that term because there's money attached to it, a monetary amount. When I say, let's see here, he says, can I be compelled to contract without the right to counteroffer? Like when a cop pulls you over, they're compelling you to contract. First thing they do is say, driver's license and registration, please. And as soon as you hand it to them, you just agreed with them to go into contract. Now the cop becomes the judge and the prosecutor and the bail man and gives you a ticket. You got to pay for it.
So now,
But can we actually say to an officer, no, I'm not giving you my driver's license or registration?
Well, you need to hear Constitution Man and Robert Usually. Yeah, a lot of folks do. Dean Clifford does. He hasn't had a driver's license or a bank account or paid taxes in like 17 years, he said.
and yet, Angela, I get the feeling that Gene Keating sort of turned it around, where, like, through the Patriot Act, where you have to have disclosure, he turns it to the people who are, trying to make life so tough for us, saying, now, under the Patriot Act, you must disclose how your corporation or whatever it is that's running after you is set up.
That's right. You turn it around on them. I had a guest on a long time ago. Her name was Lynn, and she had been in the prison for like 18 months for, I don't remember what. It was some menial thing, not murder or anything heinous like that. It was, I don't know, whatever it was not that big a deal. And after being there a while, she told the DA, the prosecutor, well, go ahead, I'll make the deal. They wanted her to plea deal. And she said, okay, go ahead and write it up and sign it and send it to me, and I'll sign it. So he did. He sent her a plea agreement that was like 7 or 8 pages long. And she got her little trusty blue pen out, and put lines through everything she did not agree with, and wrote in the margin what she did agree with, and also at the bottom, before she signed her name, she wrote, "and will be released on this date," and put the date down and signed it, and you know what? She got out that day and didn't have to do anything. I have that posted on my website. You can see where she went through.
Like
So
any
it's all
contract
about
and
context.
agreement, I agree
You
to
know,
this.
Even the Supreme Court said 99% of the prisoners in prison are there voluntarily.
Yes.
Well, how is that? How is that?
So we have to learn the art and the science, because poor Frank here got in trouble when he said, well, I'm doing it voluntarily, therefore I'm just not going to file. We can't do it that way. She actually, can you repeat the steps that she used for people who are in prison?
Well, no, you can go just look on the website, and her name is, go to the guest speakers page, and her name is Lynn Schmaltz.
Lynn Schmaltz.
And her document is there, so you can see how she did it. But the whole thing is about non-disclosure.
Right.
You know, they don't tell us what they expect us to sign things, you know, contracts without disclosing the facts. Like
Right.
we take a driver's license because we think we're supposed to have one. But the whole idea of a driver's license is to be in commerce. If you're getting paid to, you know, carry passengers, or you're getting paid to, you know, deliver merchandise or whatever, you're in commerce. But you and I have the right to travel freely without a driver's license. We don't need to ask permission.
I actually exercised my right to travel freely the other day when there was a big camera crew for the Talbot commercial. And I squared off with the policeman. I thought he was going to arrest me because I kept walking into the shot. And there's all the union people around, and you know things are costing a lot and so on. But the neighborhood is just getting so frustrated because New York City is just becoming a Hollywood set. And so I wanted to exercise my right to travel freely, but I was really flying into the radar to really test if these people paid. Well, first the policeman said anybody can get the license. Then later on, when the director came over, it seemed they were talking about a $300 figure. And then I said, well, you know, here's my building. I've paid $100,000 just of maintenance over the last 10 years. This building has got a beautiful shot that they want. Why shouldn't I get something of it? So Joe would have gone away for $50. The director said he would have given him $50, but eventually he didn't give him $50, and Joe had to go do something. And I said, Joe, I really want to go with you, but I really think I ought to stay here. So I weathered it out. Now, Joe has had many felonies. So because of that, and then he's out on bail, and he's struggling with them coming in without a warrant up in Kingston. So he wasn't real eager to get arrested again. But I've never been arrested, I don't think. I mean, there was one time in Santa Cruz when I went to save my cameras, when my husband at that time, when I was 19, was covering a protest that I really didn't know much about or particularly believe in. I just didn't want my cameras to get hurt. So I came down there to protect my cameras. I was the first person arrested. But I don't know if that's on my record or not. But I knew
I'm not advocating anyone go driving without a license until you know who you are and what you're capable of, and you know the law.
Right. Right. Angela, do you use a driver's license?
Yes, I do. I believe in, picking my battles, and that's not one I want to deal with right now.
Now, when you get it, but just one second, when you get it, can't you sign it just UD under duress? That's what Constitution Man says. And then Jane Keating says authorized representative.
Well, you can try. I think John Stewart did his driver's license that way. I think John Stewart says all rights reserved.
Yeah.
But they'll usually catch it and not allow that. But if you can get that on there, that's one way to save yourself a little bit of aggravation.
But because they say they're giving you such a small little spot that you can't write under duress or all rights reserved, but all rights reserved seems critically important. You know, the other day in the Saugerties court, just to show how important your website is, I told Joe when the prosecutor took him into his offices, I was there with Joe and Jay, and he was saying, you know, after this supposed big bust, and this was going to be difficult because of the previous bust, he wanted him to take a ticket And Joe and Jay said, how can we do that? Knowing that at any time you can come bursting in. We've already claimed we're using this religiously. There's no question that this is selective prosecution. You're persecuting us. How can we do it? So even the prosecutor knew it wasn't doable. And he actually said, if we go back to court, can we go back not during court hours, because I don't want to lose control of the courtroom. So we went back to court, and they said, do you understand that the charges have been lowered to a misdemeanor? And Joe said, Class A. And Joe said, is there anything lower? So, the prosecutor goes and he finds the lowest possible thing, some Class B. And I'm sitting there in the audience kind of waving because I'm still hearing the words, do you understand the charge? So I'm still not really happy after this. And Joe, you know how women can get kind of intense on something? Pretty soon Joe said it's time to leave New York. So he went up to Woodstock, and it was easier to face the judge than to face me. He went back. And he said, he went back as a special appearance, not a general appearance. And he said, when I said I understood that the charges were being lowered, I understood by Webster's dictionary, not Black's Law dictionary, that I'm standing under the charges. And the judge got red, upset. I mean, it was a trick.
Yeah, non-disclosure is everything for them.
Yes.
This is just like when Obama said, everybody's going to have health care. Oh, really? You're going to compel me to contract without the ability to counteroffer? They can't do that, but people don't know that.
Can you talk about any experience or teaching or teacher that you had that revealed to you that you're a powerful spiritual being? Because you must feel that, Angela, otherwise you couldn't possibly take the heat that you must be taking to have this sight.
Oh, well, that was part of my education with reading and listening to Esther and Jerry Hicks and Abraham and Ranza, and I was raised a Catholic, so Italian Catholic, so spirituality has always sort of been in my life.
Right.
But I had a near-death experience when I was 19, and I think that's what did it for me, because that was before anybody else had a near-death experience. You didn't hear about it, on TV or anything like that. It wasn't until years later, I think it was on an Oprah show or I don't remember, Sally Jesse Raphael or one of their shows, that I learned about a near-death experience or out-of-body experiences, and I related to it. But I don't know.
Angela, can you tell us about your near-death experience? I really would like to know, because I sense that this foundation and this wider perspective gave you the, as what Constitution Man talks about, intestinal fortitude. What happened when you had your near-body experience?
Well, I was in the hospital because my ex-husband, I had an abusive ex-husband, let me just put it that way, and so I wound up back in the hospital, and I was 9 months pregnant when he had his little abusive episode, so I gave birth to my son. I had 2 black eyes and a broken nose. I don't tell this story very much. Actually, I don't tell the story at all, actually. But anyway, I went into the hospital after giving birth to my son, and I was in for 2 weeks afterwards, and I was hemorrhaging. And there was a night I was in the hospital, and I was all of a sudden floating up in the ceiling, and I saw my mother and my husband and my aunt, and I was looking down at myself. It was kind of interesting because I was in a 7-bed ward, and I was commenting to myself up in the ceiling how I could see inside everybody's little area. They had a little curtain going around each bed, but I could see everybody laying there. And it was really unusual because I was questioning everything that was happening. I was looking at myself, and I was saying to myself, how could I see when my eyeballs are back down there in my head? And how come I could see my brain back down there in my head? And I was looking around, swear to God, I couldn't look off. That's how I felt. But then I could hear my mother crying, oh, Angie, don't die, don't die. And I thought to myself, I'm not going to die. I'm that baby. And I woke back up inside myself momentarily, and then I went back to sleep, and that was it. I was knocked out. But that was the extent of it. But it was very interesting. And I always remembered it. And it wasn't until years later that I heard someone relating to a similar experience on one of those talk shows, and I said up in the wedding. I wasn't on any drugs, except antibiotics, but it's always been with me, and I've always known. I've never been afraid of death since then.
Aha. Aha.
Yeah, that's a fantastic story. It reminds me of Dr. Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life, that documents a series of patients that died but flatlined. They saw the light, they reviewed their life, they decided that it wasn't their time. They come back. Story after story.
Yeah, I didn't see a light, and there was no tunnel. I was just up in the ceiling, like looking down. But I felt like I could have taken off if I wanted.
You felt you had a choice whether you'd go on to the light or the next life, or whether you'd come back to this one?
Yeah.
Right. I'm really glad you brought that up, Angela, because in reading the probate book that Gene Keatings is suggesting, that was written in 1880 for Ontario, Canada, and that it was showing, basically when people had property and they knew they were going to die, or, people know they're going to die, so they want their heirs to have whatever they've built up. You pass on the momentum, the legacy, so you give your descendants, the ability to move about better in the world, building on what you have acquired in your life. So they would take the wills and seal them up into a registrar's office. Now, when people were coming into the New World, they, everything was like the Wild West everywhere. It was just wild. Go out and get land and kill Indians and claim land. And so they would send the wills back to England. But that was like a difficult process. Maybe the ship goes down and then you need to open it up. So they would start to store the wills in a registrar's office. And you can see the way it's written. It was a solemn duty. It was the top judge that would decide if a person died intestate, I think they say, without a will, so the next of kin would make claims, and then they would have to decide. And the clerk, it was so important, the clerk, because the clerk would be the one that could take fakes. Anyway, Angela, it made me realize that this other side that Keatings talks about with probate has to do with when you get involved with death, the wishes of a dead person means that you're sort of reaching into another world. And I don't think we in this society, the way we have our television and our newspapers, it's considered unscientific to even think there's anything beyond this life. Why think about it? And that's really a pity, because most people now are so destitute. They're losing their homes, and they're getting all those that have jobs are so taxed to death. They're hardly able to have any savings. Most people are only 2 paychecks away from being evicted. So we're not thinking about probate because we don't have anything to leave. But reading that made me realize that at one time there was a belief that you should fulfill the wishes of the dead person, that it was a noble thing to do, and it was it was sacred, and it was entrusted to high authority. And so eventually they set up the courts in this country, and they imitated the courts back in England. But I heard you once talking about how when you go into a court, you get that sort of awesome feeling. Can you describe that?
Yeah, Jordan Maxwell talks about it. It's just like walking into a church.
Yeah.
You get that real awesome feeling, and then when you do a little research, you find out that the churches and the courthouses are built by Freemason architectural firms, and they build them on particular ley lines so that they resonate at a certain frequency. So when you walk in, you get that awesome feeling. And no one understands what it is. They just know, they get that feeling, when they walk in.
Right. Well, you're sensitive to that feeling. I mean, I used to see, my parents were married in 2 churches. My father was Greek Orthodox and my mother was Catholic. So when they got married in each church, they had to promise their kids to one or the other, which became an impossible thing to figure out by the time children were born. So I used to go with my grandmother, who had baptized me Catholic, and my father was furious when he found out because they hadn't figured out what they were going to do about this. So I was never confirmed. So when my grandmother would take me to church, I couldn't go to communion. I had to sit behind, and of course I thought, what a bummer. I wanted to go and eat what everybody else was eating. But when she'd take me, when she'd do the rosary, I was a little kid, so I could play around in the pews, and you would watch the light coming in through the stained glass. It really was a beautiful experience, and I did have that experience in court. So it's interesting that you were describing that, because I also had that experience when Alan Steinfeld, who's now in the control room.
Thank you, and Danny Darrow and
Joseph.
If you look at a courtroom, it is a church.
Well, when I
set up the same exact way, you've got the communion rail, you have the spectator seats, the pews, you have your 12 jurors, you have a prosecutor, you have a testimony and confession, and you've got the black robe sitting at the altar ready to sacrifice you.
I heard that they've taken and gotten trust out of the courts. Is that true?
Let me just keep that in mind, but I just want to finish my point. When Alan brought me into the studios of Manhattan Neighborhood Network, I had that same awesome feeling that I was coming into a cathedral. It was something so precious, and had Alan not supported me in those days to do the camera work and things, I never would have been able to do this. And so when I see how successful you've been on the internet, I sensed that the media too is like a cathedral. It's something special, and if we approach it that way, I think we will get back from it a lot. Like one of my business partners, he calls the internet just a sewage place, because he says so much trash is out on it. But
the information highway is where you learn. The reason my calls and my website are doing so well is because people are starving for the truth.
Right. And you become that platform of authority. You weed it out. Have you had any difficult encounters in court, and can you talk about it, or do you not want to?
No, I haven't gone to court yet for anything, so I try to steer clear.
Right. So what most interests you with all your guests? I mean, I think the reason you're such a good host is because you're not only riveting on what you're thinking about.
Well, it's a learning process. The whole thing is learning. Every time I have someone on, I learn something. So I'm very excited about it. I enjoy it. It's like all those years I went to school were a waste. I didn't learn anything there.
Where did you go to school, Angela?
Here in California. I went to St. Augustine Catholic School.
Uh-huh. And did you go to college?
No.
Oh, lucky you. You're that much ahead of the game.
Yeah, I immediately went into business for myself when I was 19 years old.
Oh, really?
So,
what did you do at 19?
Well, I sold Avon with my mother.
You sold Avon with your mother?
Yeah. And then when I was 24, I bought a bar. I liked entertaining. So I thought that would be interesting. I did that for several years. And then I decided I didn't want to do that anymore. I was telling my customers they should quit drinking. So that's not good for business. So I decided that's not the business I need to be in.
Say, Angela, can you give me any tips on quit smoking? Because you've stopped smoking.
Yes, I have. Well, yeah, actually, I realized that every time I smoked was the only time I breathed. I took a deep breath, when I took a drag of a cigarette, and I thought, well, I'm smoking to breathe, and after they put that crap in the cigarettes, that safety stuff, I started to feel it in my lungs, like something wasn't right. And so I decided that every time I wanted to smoke, I would take a lot of deep breaths, in and out, in and out. And after a few seconds of doing that, the urge would go away.
Really?
Right, you oxygenate the blood.
It's about breathing.
Wow. Were there any other things to help you with, any vitamins or supplements?
No. I gained 40 pounds. So I won the Atkins again. I'm lean now.
Now,
Also, your mental attitude is like your mind thinks I enjoy a cigarette. As soon as you think I don't enjoy it, then you shift consciousness. So it's a
That's what
perspective. You're
happened.
looking
I
this
thought
way, and then you
they're
look that
trying to
way.
kill me. I was thinking they're trying to kill me. They're putting stuff in the cigarettes to make them die out.
Right. It's good to
And
use
I
natural
appreciate
tobacco,
that.
bugle or top, and roll your own ceremonially. And it's an ancient traditional healing herb. Tobacco has a place, but it's not something that should be abused like anything. Edgar Cayce in Trance prescribed tobacco 32 times. It has a place like everything. You don't abuse it,
Right.
though. It calms down the nerve. It is a medicine, but unfortunately, with regular cigarettes, they put all these additives and crap in it to make you addicted to it. But if you use natural tobacco, you can slowly wean yourself off of it and recognize it for what it is, and eventually not even need it at all.
but Angela, do you think if you've gained so much weight that there's something that your body needs? I mean, I'm watching Joe Barton because he was doing 2 packs a day, and when I met him, I said, I just can't see being in a relationship with somebody who would do that to their body. But then, we came from such different worlds. I also I got interested in the radioactive, low-level radioactive stones and how that was curing cancer and healing other things. And then my viewers on YouTube started to direct me to Rick Simpson and the hemp oil. And I had been so anti-pot. Oh, we only have 3 minutes left, but we can get a lot done in 3 minutes. And it took me 2 years to find the oil, and then I found out Joe Barton had given oil to a Vietnam vet, and this tumor went down, and they were tracking it to give it to Governor Patterson to say, really, people need to have access to this so it will be cheaper. Do you think that the lungs themselves could be kind of, or do you know anything, first of all, about hemp oil, Angela, because you're from California?
Only from what I've heard on the Rick Simpson video.
So you haven't had a chance to use it?
I've never used it. I would love to get my hands on it because I have a disabled son who I think would benefit from it. I don't know where to get it.
Well, one of your callers the other day was saying some fascinating things that I want to listen to it again with Joe and Jay about how in California they're predicting the bust starting as soon as the crop comes in. So you can see the whole thing is just about theft. But this person seems very fortified with the knowledge that he got from you, and my hope is that when people send you donations, if they're in California, that they could send you some oil, because I have a feeling that will regulate your weight. And in watching Joe, I think it makes the lungs softer. And because of all the wear and tear of the smoking, I took a lot of the oil because I had a lump in my breast, and there's so many benefits from it. I think it's going to be known as the supreme beauty treatment.
And they'll never
They use
allow
it
it.
as
The
cosmetics.
pharmaceutical industry will never allow it. So.
Shen Yun of China, a father of agricultural medicine thousands of years ago, prescribed it. It has a worldwide culture of being a healing plant. And
Sure. I think it's biblical.
Angela, we only have a minute left, right?
Right, a little less, yeah.
Well, a little less. So I'm going to just thank you so much, and I'm going to ask if in the future you can join me when we're live, so people in my Manhattan audience can have an opportunity to ask you questions for those people.
Oh, sure.
Okay?
That'd be great. Sure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you,
Visit the
Angela.
website. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, bye.
And thank you, Alan Steinfeld and Danny Darrow and Desiree
Josie
in the
and-
control.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry you didn't get a chance to ask questions, but maybe in the future.